It remains to be seen whether the South African Communist Party will campaign for the ANC in this year's local government elections. Last week, Public Service Union Nehawu says it had decided to withdraw its support for the governing party in the upcoming polls. Now, the tripartite alliance of the ANC, SACP and COSATU was formed back in 1990 and has stayed intact throughout the decades. The SACP held its Central Committee plenary meeting where the reconfiguration of the alliance was discussed. But what does this mean? To tell us more, we're joined now by Solly Mafahila, who is the party's first Deputy General Secretary. Solly, good morning. Thanks for coming on to the AM report. And, you know, we've been covering the story for some weeks now, this discussion around the tripartite alliance not making it to these local government elections. And I must tell you, the response from our viewers, particularly on social media, was, we've heard this all before, and there's no way that this alliance will break up. What are you saying might be different this time around?
Thank you very much, Michelle. I think it's important that we appreciate the centrality of the alliance and the program that the alliance is implementing in South Africa. It's an important, thoroughgoing program that seeks to resolve centuries long of racial exploitation, of class exploitation, as well as of patriarchy and gender exploitation. And therefore, that program, we have developed as the alliance at least a program that is everyone accepted as a minimum program to take our people out of that quagmire. The Freedom Charter is the basis that we follow to develop policies in our government. And therefore, from this perspective, the implementation of the Freedom Charter or non-implementation thereof, and even the implementation of a general social development program. As you know, the Freedom Charter was adopted way back in June 1955. It's a long time. So there are many things that have developed that requires urgent intervention. It is those contradictions or difficulties that have confronted us. But in the main, we have agreed that we will keep the alliance, but have internal discussions about the focus of this alliance. For instance, on economic intervention, we don't need neoliberal austerity measures imposed on our economy because that affects social services in the main, which the people of this country requires, particularly given the underdevelopment of certain parts of our country. We also require that in doing so, you fund, for instance, children of the poor and the working class for their education, to skill them from primary level up to a higher education. But you still require the rich to pay for their children because they can afford to do so. So this is a program that requires both the support of all sections of our society to make sure that we don't put one burden on one government, on the government. Because, for instance, the areas that will require common development by government will affect all of us if government has to do everything. So it is in this regard that the debates are focusing on. For instance, the posture on government support for the rich through economic interventions, that worries us most. Even though the rich, when they are supported, particularly big business, they don't create the jobs that are required. Everyone still looks at government for the creation of jobs. So we call for support of the public sector-based economy and public interest economy, as well as putting people before profit, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. We know we can have access to important vaccines that have been developed. The first vaccine to be developed, as we know, was the Russians. The Western countries condemned that vaccine as not credible. Later on, when they began to take stock of their own vaccines, they then admitted that the Russian vaccine is also credible. But now our South African government in particular is dragging its feet towards requiring that particular vaccine. And in particular, the Central Committee was scathing on the approach that SAPRA is doing to implement or to approve certain medicines to be used in our country. There's medicine on diabetic, for instance, in Cuba, that stops amputation of people with sugar diabetes in our country and everywhere else in the world. It's highly revered all over the world, but they don't want to approve it. And people are being amputated. We are now seeking to take action against some of these institutions so that we can also hold them accountable and also liable for refusal to use a medication that is available to stop amputations, and people continue to be amputated in their hundreds in our country every single month. So this is just unacceptable, the manner in which some of the state institutions are actually captured by Western interests. So in this regard, we have put special focus on government expanding acquisition of vaccines from Cuba and other medication like this one on diabetic from Cuba, from China, from Russia. And of course, we're not saying they mustn't get from Western countries. We're simply saying they must expand the scope of their procurement.
Yeah.
And the disruption of not even approving some of these vaccines on urgent basis, but the Western vaccines, even when they're still on trial basis, they are fully approved. It's unacceptable. But the local government elections one, we have agreed to have a discussion with our alliance partners, particularly given the state of local government and the difficulties that we face. But we have put some basic principles. The first one is that the guidelines for the selection of local government councillors should be inclusive of the alliance, and that the alliance partners, the Communist Party in particular, will not accept to be treated as a league of the ANC, important as those leagues are and respectful as we are to those leagues. But we're not a league of the ANC, we're its alliance partner. And therefore, we want to be treated as such, even in how they put their elections guidelines, as well as we will reject the imposition of councillors. But we have also resolved in some instances that we'll announce in a few weeks after a consultation with the Politburo and also the alliance partners, because the Central Committee was quite clear about this question of local government. So we felt that given courtesy and respect to our alliance partners, we'll first have discussions with them before we make some pronouncement in this regard.
So Sally, you're basically saying that, you know, the work of the tripartite alliance needs to continue with the SACP not withdrawing its support. Particularly, you've mentioned a lot of issues around our vaccine rollout plan as a country, which arguably we are lagging very far behind at. But what does it mean when organizations like NEHAU come out and say that they will withdraw their support?
Yes, the Central Committee firstly disagreed vehemently with government on reneging from the public sector wage agreements that they've entered into with workers. And they've also, as you know, implemented part of this 3-year agreement for 2 years. And on the 3rd year, they agreed, they renege on this agreement on flimsy grounds that there's no money. And yet they were able to guarantee over 200 billion to the financial sector in the stimulus package. And those banks, despite that this money was coming from them, was guaranteed by government. They never even used 20 billion of that particular money to help particularly businesses that were making revenue of less than 300 million rand. So we're saying, and the public sector wage bill was not even about 67 billion. So we said, how can you guarantee 200 billion and yet you can't guarantee 67 billion of workers, your own workers, who are in the front line of the fight against COVID-19 and whose income will also be part and parcel of this particular economy. You guarantee institutions that whose money will be flouted all over the world and not be even guaranteed for further investment in the country. So it is in this regard that we understand the stance of NEHAU, but we'll engage the unions. We're having a bilateral with COSATU before the 7th of April. As you know, we had a bilateral with COSATU a week ago. One of the issues on the table was this very same one on approach to local government elections, as well as the whole notion of the reconfiguration of the alliance and how the alliance components with the ANC feel that they have been treated by the ANC. And therefore, after this discussion, we should be able to find common solutions as a movement. But we did support, we understand the stance that NEHAU has taken. We still feel that collectively as a movement, if we sort out our differences, we should be able to approach our people together, united as one, and put our case and indicate where we've failed and where we've done well, where we need the support, and holistically mobilize our people to make sure that we continue to transform our country. And in that regard, we also supported the campaign for the defense of our democracy and our constitution. That's why our theme of this year, as well adopted by this Central Committee of our centenary, also seeks to talk to not putting profits before people. In fact, we say put people before profits.
Solly Mapaila, thanks for coming on to the AM Report. He is the SACP's first Deputy General Secretary as we continue to talk alliance matters, particularly in a local government election year. That's 2021.